For a long time, the Tales of series has been a collection of games that I've somehow managed to purchase multiple times but never truly beaten one of the games. So today I want to go through Tales of Symphonia and just tell y'all things I liked about it, things I didn't, and overall what the formula meant to me as a whole. But first I should probably hit y'all up with the history of what Tales of Symphonia is to me and how I even found the game. So, a long time ago, back when I was a lot younger, I had finished playing a majority of the Final Fantasy games that had interested me, and all that was really left for me to play was 1, 2, and like 10 2, but I still have not played 10 2. Whatever. But yeah, so I was thinking about other RPGs that looked interesting to me, and then Tales of Symphonia caught my eye. So at the time, the best version to get was the PS3 version, and it had 2 games. So I was like, hey, that's a pretty good bargain. I get the regular Tales of Symphonia, then like the sequel, so that's pretty good. Played it on my friend's PS3. Forgot that PS3 games are saved on console instead of disc. Don't know what I was thinking. Too much 3DS, and then never got to the point where I got to then. I then tried to play it on my own PS3, got bored because I was basically replaying the same, first 10 hours that I played before and never played it again. So technically this is my 4th time trying to beat Tales of Symphonia. And right off the bat, I do gotta acknowledge that this game's pacing is all over the place. Now, let me clarify this. Pacing is definitely a subjective feeling because some people feel like RPGs are supposed to move a lot slower, and some people feel like RPGs are going to move faster. So pacing is never inherently a problem with the game, so much as it's a problem that's dependent, person by person. You're automatically going to like pacing of a game differently depending on what you played first and what just feels right with you. But for me, in Tales of Symphonia, this game never really felt like it was at a good pace. And that's even like later on in the game. Early in the game, it's hella slow, and that is, normal for JRPG or RPG in general standards because they expect to have a slow start, expansive middle, and then a crazy end with, trials and tribulations. But the thing about this game's beginning is that the pacing for it is hella slow. And then, once you get past the start of the game, things start to feel a little bit more routine, but the pacing never really feels like it improves because there are always like tasks that they give you, right? For example, for the first half of the game, it's, break the mana sails so that you can regenerate the world. Yeah, you do that, and then the pacing for you to do that is, well, the story right now is all over the place, and you're figuring out small little things, but overall, you're not really doing anything besides going to 4 locations, right? And then you're like, okay, well, whatever, that's the beginning of the game. So then they do that again with the other Guardian Seals, and you have to go to 5 more locations, and then they do that again with trying to cure Colette's illness, which you then go to 4 more locations. So overall, I get that the game is trying to just push you to different dungeons and make the game feel more complete, but I never really felt like the ideas of the game were that varied up apart from very select parts of the game, like visiting the elf forest or going to the base where the half-elves are. That always felt better to me in terms of varying up the scenery and making things look a little more interesting, but for a majority of the game, you're just looking for 4 things, then looking for 3 things, then looking for 4 things. And then the very few parts in which the game is not that is very cool to me. I really enjoy those parts because you get to explore things. Certain cities, I feel like that could have had way more importance than they did, like for Lenora, because that city is just beautiful. Didn't really have much to do with it because the game was too busy on making you, tick off checkboxes. But that's just, I guess, RPG standard. But coming from playing this game, I really just didn't really care for it. I felt like they didn't have to make everything I get 4 of these, then get 3 of these, then get 4 of these, because when the story isn't that, the story is actually pretty good, and so are the engagements between the characters and the pacing. But because constantly the game is trying to force you to meet a requirement of 4 or 3, it just kind of feels like the stuff surrounding that doesn't really matter, right? Just a thought, but the pacing for this game feels kind of whack. I enjoyed the pacing of this game when the objectives that you're supposed to do isn't just, you know, obtain so and so to get so and so, but when the game isn't like that, that's about, I'd say, 30% of the game's progression, if even that. But yeah, I didn't really enjoy the pacing in this game. However, although the pacing can be a little off sometimes, the dungeons and the actual fighting in the game is great. I never got tired of the actual combat in the game when you go into fights because it's a spin on what RPGs have been trying to do for the longest without, you know, making a system where you're actively fighting against yourself. There's always been a struggle between gameplay and actual narrative in an RPG because, you know, you either do bare bones and just make it turn-based and don't try and add any extra anything to it to basically just make a regular RPG, or you try and reinvent the wheel, and sometimes it ends good and sometimes it ends bad. An example of when it didn't end so good was Final Fantasy 15, because you're playing it and although the combat in that game is good to me, you know you've seen better in the same style of what that game is. And sometimes you get really good examples like Dark Souls, you know? Although the combat in Dark Souls is very good, look at how it started out. It was never really meant to be a game where combat was the main focus. Look at some of the bosses and the other designs in it. But it ended up being that because, you know, they mixed some things together, it worked really well, and people liked it, so it started becoming a product of what it was. I feel like the Tales of Symphonia combat is right in the middle of being good enough to where I can see the RPG in it without feeling like I only want to play the combat, and it has room for improvement because basically you're on a three-dimensional plane that you move in 4 directions in, and by simulating a three-dimensional plane, it already makes it cool because you now have to worry about your teammates' positioning. Do you want your mates to play close line with you? Do you want your mates to play backline? In this game, TP, or the juice that you need to basically do arts and stuff, you get it by hitting enemies. So by making this simple push and pull of a system like this, it makes you think, alright, do I want my mates to try and do, you know, regular attacks during regular battle and then make them go all out during the boss battles to where they could do long range magic? Do I want them to only heal me? Do I want my frontliners to play tanks? Do I want them to sit here and only try and do damage? And then once you figure out how to chain arts together, you end up doing combos that do 10k in like 50 hits. And that's the beauty of this game. I always love games that do stuff like this. Very low entry barrier, right? For a majority of this game, you can just hit forward and just mash the hit button, right? And then once you actually start coordinating it and learning your team composition, you can do long chain combos that basically makes that the enemy never gets a turn. And I love stuff like that because it's by itself making it so that you can like the game by just playing it. You don't have to sit here and learn about it. You just try shit out and eventually it just clicks, right? But the systems surrounding that need to be good for the game to be better. So let's talk about what happens in terms of the other game systems that boost the combat. The equip screen is kind of other than like the accessories, it really does not mean anything. You can literally be here and just keep mashing optimal to find the right equipment for you, so that's the thing. But where it gets really interesting is the X spheres and switching to T and S. So basically there's 2 different styles in this game. I believe it's technical and strong or technical and stylish, I'm not too sure, but it's basically T and S, and depending on how you set up your X spheres, which is also a different system in which you can raise different attributes in your party members to make them fight a different way. It'll basically say T-type or S-type at the bottom, and there come different perks with it. Like, usually S-type traits means that you're more stronger in fights, and T-type variants give you more technical finesse, like better running speed, better dash, maybe outworld movement, lower enemy encounter rate, cool stuff like that. By choosing either a T or a S constant, you start to move the grid on the character select screen to one side or the other. And depending on where the grid moves, depends on what moves you're going to learn. And this is a really cool system by itself, because not only does it make you learn these moves by actually using them in battle, it also makes you just choose a choice. Because here's the thing, who really cares about what T and S really means? At the end of the day, it's just another way for you to get abilities, which is cool because getting abilities off a power-up does not really feel like that rewarding. So this is another way for you to get abilities, right? But it's also rewarding you by saying, hey, use these abilities more so that they can level up, basically. And by the time you use them more, you end up finding new combos, new things you want to try out. Basically, in the beginning of the game, TNS is going to be like, damn, this is a lot for me right now. But then by the end of the game, you're going to be like, maybe I like her more in T, maybe I like her more in S. And this game promotes multiple playthroughs, so go ahead, choose T, choose S. It doesn't really matter to me. It doesn't really matter to you. You'll be able to see which is better later on the line. So that was really cool for me to check out in the game. In addition to this, the game also has statuses, which basically make it so that if you put a character's stats a certain way, they gain different attributes based on when they level up. There's a lot of cool things like this in the game system, to where you can like break level caps because, or not level caps, but break certain caps on things because of the tiles that you gain. But that's like a whole different system altogether that I'm not gonna explain right now, because we'll get into that at the end of the video. But yeah, combat is really good in this game, and you can play as all the characters. So if you ever get tired of playing as Lloyd, you can even play as a mage and play long range if you really want to. Me, I had the most fun playing as Lloyd because, come on now. But, you know, it was very enjoyable. I enjoyed the combat a lot, and it is by far probably the best thing in this game. Now let's talk dungeons. Dungeons in this game are interesting because they all use the same mechanic, which is the ring that you get in the first dungeon, the sorcerer's ring, right? Hit the square button, hit the X button, whatever button it is, and then you basically shoot out the ring, or the ring activates and does something different. This is a very cool mechanic, but you gotta remember there's 12 dungeons in this game, and sometimes this mechanic is hella sick, like with the bubbles and being able to move from left to right depending on the wind flow and killing plants to move that way. That's a lot, but you'll know if you played it. That's really cool, but then sometimes you just get a ring that shoots water, and it's like, okay, I shoot water at this thing. Cool. So overall, the dungeons are good, and because they all play with the same function in mind, it's very hard to get confused about what to do next in a dungeon. However, it's very easy to fail what you have to do next in execution, if that makes sense. So because you always know that you have to press square to continue, it's very easy to know, right, I need to hit this thing to hit square to then hit that thing to do something else. But the way that you have to do it is not always clear, so that keeps the puzzles good enough in this game. But bottom line, so long as you remember your square button and you have, you know, common sense, the puzzles aren't that hard. Some of them are literally meant to be like trial and error, but most of them are not that bad. But I will say that where the dungeons get interesting are usually where the place you're at doesn't look like a dungeon. When it looks like a dungeon, you're probably going to be bored. But when it doesn't look like a dungeon, and it looks like an actual place you're supposed to walk around in, like a forest or something, the dungeons will usually be a lot of fun. But other than the combat, an RPG is really only as good as its story, and an RPG story is only as good as its characters. So you know we have to address the suspects. And for the characters, it's interesting because some of them are fleshed out in the main story, and then some of them don't really get their character arc until their side stories, right? And if you try and care about the main arc character story, some of the characters really just don't shine at all, or are only there when you absolutely need them to be there for the story and not really there narratively for anything else. So it's kind of a weird push and pull. And all the characters, you know, some of them really do get a lot of good representation, like Rain, unfortunately Genus, Colette for that matter, and Lloyd. But if you look at like the other cast, Regal and Presea don't really get anything else after you solve their problems. And I mean, for how strong those characters are and how much they could have done with them, it's kind of like, well, their one little side story is done, so that's it. If you care about them more than that, then you probably shouldn't, because they weren't that important to begin with. bottom line, every character does what they need to do, and none of them really annoy me, except for Genius because he, oh my god, straight up just the ops. 20% of the story, he's crying. During 20% of the story, he's trying to help the enemy, and then when he's done helping the enemy, he straight up is getting people killed. Genius is the ops. And he's damn near the second character, bro. Like, he's the second main character, and it's just like, bro, so much wasted potential. Trash character. I don't even... Just don't even talk to me about Genius. But other than that, the rest of the characters are pretty cool. I enjoyed them in terms of, like, what they meant for the story and how they played and just their character design overall. Especially Sheena, because Sheena's pretty cool. And so are the rest of the characters. They can be a little tropey at times, and that is its own kind of conversation off of whether or not they feel real enough. But then at the same time, like, who really cares? Their entire job is just to be companions in a long RPG, and they fit that role good enough, with enough, you know, plot twists and stuff like that. So they're fun, but also there's nothing really to write home about. Besides, like, favorites, because I, you know, had a lot of fun having them in my party. I never really felt like any character could die at any moment and I would care that much. So yeah, but overall still a pretty good game and very cool designs, especially when looking at what's seen as cool now in the Tales of series. And they try to make you care about these characters a little more through the optional panels that you can view that give you more of an insight on who they were before they met up, and other, like, story related things that aren't focused on the main plot, but they are just what they are, optional. And the movement speed for the text bubbles don't really go fast enough to where I feel like I should read it. So, oops. But fighting isn't all your party members are good for. They also have character, because they are characters in the end of the day. And this is one of the biggest missed opportunities with this game, while also simultaneously being one of the greatest factors in it. It's really what you choose to put in. If you want to see these characters as RPG characters, damn near rejected anime characters that you only somewhat care about, then you can do that. But you also have many events that you can do with damn near all of them to make them feel more inclusive, to just make them feel more like real people. But a lot of what the game is does not push you towards these events, which is why, although Tales of Symphonia is a very fun game, it is very much a game that you gotta play more than once or have to at least know what you're doing. Tales of Symphonia, if you're trying to beat it regularly, get to the main story, maybe do a little bit of side quests, is about, I'd say, 40 to 50 hours, right? If you're trying to 100% the game quickly becomes a game over 100 hours long because of how much extra things, missable things, everything is in this game. This game is just packed to the brim with extra content, extra things. The game literally encourages you to play a new game plus. I'm not just talking about some, you know, new game plus that they think of afterwards. And in fact, many RPGs don't even have a new game plus. All they really have is, you know, kick off from where your last save file was and go do that post game now. But no, the entirety of Tales of Symphonia is the post game, and it's hard to understand that unless you beat the game once. So I really urge you to beat the game once and then go back to doing everything else. And there's nothing wrong with, on your first playthrough, not doing everything, but the game wants you to at some point do everything. This game is a long game, but why should you? And this is the important thing, and it's because there are really some cool interactions if you do, and there's also some things that you will never understand that you will miss if you don't, such as extra costumes, different islands that you have to go through, new places that only really matter when you actually have other things to do. But that is like the biggest, I'd say, appeal, while also being the biggest drawback of Tales of Symphonia. It is, in terms of an RPG, one of the most hands-off games I've ever played in my life. In terms of games in general, not even just as an RPG, this game just does not ask you to do anything, while also not really hating you for not doing it, right? You can, bottom line, you can go across this game technically beating it in 7 hours if you want. And that's not saying much from an RPG, and you could probably do it a lot sooner, but it's because the game wants you to do that, not because the game is, not because you're sequence breaking or anything like that. And that is a good thing, because for multiple playthroughs, bro, you're gonna love this game, right? However, for your first playthrough, you're gonna be annoyed at times where the game is very vague, intends for you to explore on your own. You can end up missing whole events that, you know, you were like, oh, didn't that kind of happen? But, oh, bottom line, the game's ending snuck up on me. I was like, hold on, aren't I supposed to go in? Oh, I can't do that no more because, oh. But yeah, so you're gonna miss a lot of things. Sometimes unfortunate events will happen and you just won't even be able to go to that town anymore. And it's supposed to be that way. You're supposed to not really know what's going on in this game until it's too late, until you play it again and have the same fun. But like I said, that works in a big scale on what to do, but on a same scale where it's not as fun, it's alright, I missed this event. Okay, I'm walking around the map for 3 hours not knowing where to go. I missed checking one area where a book is, then go back to another area 5 minutes away, then go back to another area that's 7 minutes away, which can all be avoided on the first attempt if I knew what I was looking for, but the game didn't really tell me that. So it's a lot of backtracking, especially if you don't have the knowledge. But in the end of the day, it also creates a game where, as an RPG, there's more content here than there even needs to be. With also replayability for future replays. It's a good game. I really enjoyed Tales of Symphonia. And I haven't even touched the new game plus for this game yet, because I was like, you know, I'm good on Tales of Symphonia for now. I've put a lot of hours into it. I finally beat the game. I intend to play Tales of the Abyss, and then during the end game of Tales of the Abyss, I'm gonna play Tales of Symphonia's post game, then switch back and forth between the two, so I don't get bored of one game. That's what the plan is. But I said to myself that that's everything. I don't really wanna even look into that right now. But the option is still there, and the game is better off of it. Trust me, the game is better off of it. So don't be upset if you didn't get to do everything you want to do on your first playthrough, but you'll eventually be able to do them when you get around to it, or when you get more knowledge. And it's so cool because discovering this game out, I wouldn't say this is a guide game, but on second playthrough and third playthrough, I'd say it'd be cool for you to use a guide just so you know all the things that you can do. And probably use like a not spoiler guide so that you don't get spoiled by the event, but you know where to go and what to do. But at the same time, it must have been so fun when this game first came out in like 2004 for people to experiment and see what the post game really had to offer. So that's really cool too. So basically, go play Tales of Symphonia. It's always been a game I've been wary of or knew about, but it to me has never really struck the same acclaim as I'd say the Final Fantasy series in terms of RPGs. And overall, I really enjoyed my time with this game. Despite most of the game being behind the new game plus, I still really enjoyed myself playing Tales of Symphonia. And to be entirely honest, I didn't think I would, because the aesthetic of this game doesn't really speak to me. I'm not really a big fan on like castles and kingdoms and, you know, older in looks but with, you know, different kind of aesthetics on them. For example, no character besides Sheena, Lloyd, well, that's just it, Sheena and Lloyd really had an interesting character design to me, to where I felt like they would even become like personal favorites. Nobody really spoke to me in this game in terms of design or aesthetic. So for me to still enjoy this game that much and not really care about and most of the characters is really good, considering that's why I care about them most in RPGs. So yeah, go play Tales of Symphonia, but more than anything, go play the Tales of series. Just from the combat alone, I can tell this series has a lot more to show me, and playing one of the earliest games, I'm really excited to soon play Tales of the Abyss and eventually get to Vesperia, and then maybe Arise in the future. And definitely Exilia, because Exilia looked very cool to me aesthetically. So yeah, but go play Tales of Symphonia. It's a really fun game. It's on Steam. I will say though, the Steam version of this game has audio issues, so be careful when you purchase, if you choose to purchase that version. But other than that, go play Tales of Symphonia. It's a really great game. I enjoyed myself. 50 hours, and if you want a very long game to play that's RPG heavy, if you just never played the Tales of series in general, today is the day you can go and do that right now.